Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt like you're fighting a silent battle no one else can see? That no matter what you achieve, a part of you keeps pulling you back? Doubting, judging, ours, or criticizing. What if I told you that the greatest enemy you'll ever face doesn't live outside of you? It lives within. In this message, we're going to confront the invisible war you've been fighting with yourself, so you can finally lay down the weapons and rise into peace, clarity, and purpose. There comes a moment in life, quick but powerful, where we begin to notice that the battlefield isn't the job, the relationship, or the world outside. It's inside our own minds. We are the soldiers and the enemy, the wounded and the healer. And until we become conscious of this war, we will keep waging it unconsciously, believing our fears are facts, our insecurities are truths, and our doubts are destiny. This is not a speech about external success. This is a return inward, a moment of sacred stillness where you're realizing the war you're fighting isn't with others, it's with yourself. And today, that war ends. There is a voice within you, persistent, persuasive, and strangely familiar. It creeps in during quiet moments, whispers in times of uncertainty, and grows louder when you dare to dream. It doesn't shoot, but it knows exactly where to strike. It tells you you're not ready, that you're not enough, that someone else is more deserving. It questions your every move, second guesses your instincts, and feeds you doubt disguised as caution. It sounds like you, but it is not you. That voice is the inner critic. And for many, it becomes the most powerful force shaping their reality. Not because it is true, but because it goes unchallenged. We internalize it as our identity, our common sense, our voice of reason. But if we were to peel back the layers, we would see that voice was constructed. It was assembled from the voices of others. Parents who meant well but projected their fears. Teachers who judged instead of nurtured. Society's constant reminders that you must become someone, that you must turn. Love, that your worth is conditional. Somewhere along the journey, that voice attached itself to your sense of self. It moved in without knocking, settled in without invitation. It began narrating your life with authority. And slowly, you stopped questioning it. You started believing it. You began to think, maybe I am too much. Maybe I am not talented enough. Maybe I should wait until I'm perfect. This is how the war against yourself begins. Not with an explosion, but with a whisper that takes root in the soil of your subconscious. What makes the inner critic so dangerous is not just what it says, but when it speaks. It shows up in the most sacred moments, right before you take a leap of faith, right before you speak your truths, right before you say yes to growth. It senses your expansion and moves in to shrink you, not because it hates you, but because it fears change. It equates familiarity with safety. Its job isn't to destroy you, it's to keep you where you've always been, in the known, in the limited, in the small. But you are not here to live a small life. You are not here to play it safe until the day you die. You are here to awaken to the truth of who you are. And part of that awakening means recognizing you are not your thoughts. You are not the voice that doubts. You are the one who hears it. When you begin to see the voice of the inner critic for what it is, a compilation of past conditioning and emotional echoes, you start to disarm it. You stop taking its words as prophecies. You begin to notice the difference between instinct and insecurity, between warning and wounding. The moment you observe the critic without identifying with it, you reclaim your inner space. That's when clarity arises, because beneath the noise there is another voice, quieter, more ancient. It's the voice of intuition, of wisdom, of knowing. It doesn't rush or panic. It whispers, but its words feel like home. This voice is often drowned out by the critic because it doesn't use fear to get your attention. It doesn't attack you. It loves you. It reminds you of your wholeness. 8 hours, even when you've forgotten. It sees your light, even when you feel lost. That voice, your inner guide, has been there the whole time, waiting for you to stop waging war on yourself long enough to hear it. But hearing it requires presence. It requires stillness. Most of all, it requires compassion. Because once you begin to witness how harsh life treated yourself, how often you've abandoned yourself, doubted your own soul, ignored your own heart, you don't need another lecture. You need tenderness. You need forgiveness. You need to become the presence you've always longed for. The war against yourself often intensifies when you're close to a breakthrough. That's when the critic panics. That's when it becomes desperate. It will bring up your oldest fears, your deepest wounds. It will remind you of every past failure, every rejection, every humiliation. Ours. Not because you're failing, because you're evolving. Growth threatens the survival of the inner critic, and its survival depends on your silence, your agreement, your surrenders. But once you speak back to it, not with violence, but with awareness, it begins to lose its power. You start to respond instead of react. You choose your thoughts instead of being ruled by them. You begin to rewrite the internal narrative that's been dictating your life for far too long. You were never meant to live in constant conflict with yourself. You were never meant to spend your life apologizing for your existence, questioning your worth, negotiating your value. That's not humility. That's self-abandonment. And the cost is too high. It's not just your dreams that suffer. It's your joy, your peace, your presence. When you're at war with yourself, you can't truly connect with others. You can't fully create. You can't deeply rest, because even in moments of silence, the battle rages on inside. But here's something sacred: the critic loses control the moment you become curious. When you stop resisting it and start examining it. When you ask, whose voice is this? Where did I first hear this? Why have I believed this for so long? You bring consciousness into the conversation. And consciousness is the beginning of freedom. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not too late. These are the lies the critic uses to keep you from beginning. But you can begin now. You can step out of the battles, not by fighting harder, but by listening deeper, by returning to yourself, by choosing to no longer believe everything you've been told to believe about who you are. There is a strange paradox that lives inside many of us. On one hand, we deeply desire growth, expansion, and fulfillment. We speak of our dreams. We visualize success. We even take steps toward it. But then something happens. Without warning, we find ourselves delaying, hesitating, doubting. We procrastinate on the things that matter most. We start projects but don't finish them. We avoid taking the very actions we know would set us free. And quietly, unknowingly, we sabotage the life we claim to want. This is the hidden dance of self-sabotage, a deeply embedded defense mechanism that doesn't arise from weakness or laziness, but from fear. Not the kind of fear that jumps out in emergencies, but the subtle, chronic fear of becoming who we truly are, because with growth comes responsibility, with success comes visibility, with healing comes change. And that change can be terrifying, even if it's everything we've ever asked for. Self-sabotage isn't always loud. In fact, most of the time it wears a mask of logic. It tells you, now's not the right time, or you're not quite ready yet. It convinces you that you need one more course, one more validation, one more sign from the universe before you begin. But underneath all those excuses lies a more painful belief that maybe, just maybe, you're not worthy of what you seek. We weren't born doubting ourselves. That was taught somewhere in your life. Someone or something convinced you that your light was too bright, your voice too loud, your dreams too unrealistic. And instead of rejecting that lie, you swallowed it. You adjusted. You made yourself smaller so others could feel comfortable. You hid your gifts so you wouldn't be criticized. You lowered your expectations so you wouldn't be disappointed. This is how the pattern begins. Not because you wanted to destroy your potential, but because you wanted to protect your heart. Because if you never try, you never fail. If you stay in the familiar, you won't be judged. If you stay invisible, you can't be rejected. But the cost of this protection is profound. You trade your truth for safety. You trade your power for predictability. You trade your life for that looks fine on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. The truth is, the part of you that sabotages your progress is trying to keep you alive. It believes that staying in the known, no matter how painful, is safer than venturing into the unknown, even if that unknown is your freedom. So you stay stuck. Not because you can't move forward, but because some part of you still believes it's dangerous to. You might notice this pattern show up in moments of transition. You get an opportunity in those 8 hours, and suddenly you feel unqualified. You start building momentum, and suddenly you lose interest. You begin to shine, and suddenly you hear that inner voice whispering, who do you think you are? It's almost like clockwork. The moment you start rising, something inside you pulls the emergency brake, and that's the part that needs love. Not judgment, not shame, love. Most of us try to fight self-sabotage with willpower. We push harder, discipline more, hustle through it. But that's like screaming at a frightened child to stop crying. It doesn't heal the wound, it deepens it, because self-sabotage doesn't come from laziness, it comes from unresolved pain. It's a symptom of a deeper belief that says, I'm not enough, I don't deserve this, or good things don't last for people like me. When you begin to listen to that belief, not obey it, but to listen, you create the possibility for transformation. You start to recognize that the part of you that avoids, delays, or distracts isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to protect the parts of you that still feel unworthy, unloved, or unsafe. But you are not that scared version of yourself anymore. You are not defined by your old pains. You are not that child still seeking approval from the world outside. There is a power in you that has never been touched by trauma. There is a voice within you that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. And it is that voice, your authentic self, that is calling you forward. But to answer that call, you must stop punishing yourself for your own growth. You must stop creating chaos every time peace starts to settle in. You must stop extinguishing your own fire the moment it starts to light the way. The way out of self-sabotage is not to shame yourself into action, but to forgive yourself into alignment. It's to look at all the ways you've held yourself back and say, in those stand, I understand why. Not to justify it, but to make peace with it. To bring compassion to the corners of your life where fear still lingers. To bring light to the shadows that have kept you from trusting your own expansion. You are not your patterns. You are the awareness behind them. And with that awareness, you can choose again. You can catch yourself before you quit. You can pause before you shrink. You can breathe before you run. And in that pause, you can speak to the part of you that's scared, not with judgment, but with love. When you stop sabotaging your light, you begin to live with more ease. You begin to recognize that success doesn't mean pressure. That healing doesn't mean perfection. That joy doesn't require guilt. You realize that it's not your circumstances that have been in your way. It's the story you've been telling yourself about who you are and what you deserve. And that story is ready to be rewritten. There comes a point in every inner journey where progress stalls, not because you're not trying hard enough, but because you're carrying too much weight. Emotional weight. The kind of burden that isn't visible to the world, but lives in your nervous system, your self-talk, your choices. It's the quiet shame you hold about a past decision, the regret that shows up when no one is watching, the guilt that colors your sense of self. And if you sit with it long enough, you'll find that much of this heaviness comes from one place, the absence of forgiveness. We often think of forgiveness as something we extend to others, a generous act, a noble step, a release of resentment toward someone who wronged us. But rarely do we talk about the harder kind of forgiveness, the kind we withhold from ourselves, the kind that hides in our shadow, the kind that feels like weakness when in truth, it is the greatest strength. There is a war that many are fighting every day, but it's not visible on the surface. It's not about the world. It's about self-condemnations, about the story we continue to tell ourselves about who we were and what we did. And it sounds like this. If I had been stronger, maybe that wouldn't have happened. If I hadn't made that choice, I wouldn't have lost everything. I should have known better. These are the subtle wounds that self-forgiveness was meant to heal, but we often avoid that healing. Why? Because part of us believes we deserve the pain. That punishment equals redemption. That if we carry it long enough, maybe we'll make up for what we did or what we failed to do. But forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about releasing the grip it has on your soul, because the past isn't hurting you anymore. Your relationship with it is. What you're reliving is not the moment itself, but the meaning you've assigned to it. That meaning becomes identity. That identity becomes self-sabotage. And that sabotage becomes a lifetime of delays, distraction, and disconnection. You cannot fight your way out of that prison. You can only love your way out. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's not forgetting, it's remembering with clarity. It's looking at your own shadow without turning away. Not to criticize, but to understand. To hold space for the version of you that did the best they could with what they knew, with the tools they had, with the level of awareness they lived in at the time. But awareness doesn't come easily. It requires courage. The courage to sit in silence and face the echo of your own actions. The courage to see your humanness without falling into self-hatred. The courage to take responsibility without crucifying yourself for it. You're not here to endlessly relive your pain. You're here to transmute it. To turn shame into wisdom. To turn guilt into guidance. To turn regret into resolve. This is what it means to make peace with your shadow. Not to deny it, but to invite it home. To recognize that your darkness is not your enemies. It is your unintegrated truth. The things you try to hide are often the parts of you that most need your acceptance. And until you offer that acceptance, you will keep projecting your inner war onto everything around you. You will keep sabotaging your joy, distrusting your blessings, and attracting relationships that mirror your unresolved pains. Because the energy of unforgiveness isn't passive. It's magnetic. It affects how you show up in the world. It leaks into your tone, your posture, your decisions. It becomes a silent filter over every new beginning, a haunting reminder that you are still chained to your yesterday. And when that chain is unacknowledged, you start to believe that your only escape is perfection, that if you never mess up again, maybe you'll earn your own forgiveness. But forgiveness is not a prize at the end of perfections. It is a decision made in the presence of imperfection. You are not here to be flawless, you are here to be whole. And wholeness includes your past. It includes the moments you wish you could redo. It includes the mistakes you can't take back. Not because those things define you, but because they shaped you, they taught you, they stretched you. And now they ask you not to carry them, but to understand them, to bless them, to grow from them. You do not need to continue paying for something you've already learned from. Growth is the evidence that you are not who you were, and that growth is enough. But you must seal it. You must trust that healing is allowed, even when the wound came from your own hand. There's a version of you, younger and wounded, still frozen in time, still replaying the memory, still questioning the choice, still looking for someone to say, you're still lovable, even now. That someone is you. It has always been you, because no one else lives with your thoughts. No one else sees the moments you revisit in silence. Only you can decide to finally give yourself permission to be free. Forgiveness is not a one-time act. It's a practice, a return, a softening. And each time you choose to forgive, you are not just letting go of the past. You are reclaiming the present. You are allowing yourself to breathe again, to trust again, to create again. You stop needing punishment to prove that you've changed, and instead allow your peace to be the proof. There is a quiet ache that lives in the hearts of many. It's not the kind of pain that announces itself loudly. It hides behind the need to achieve more, fix more, heal more, be more. It's the feeling that something is missing, not just in life, but in you, that somehow, somewhere along the way, a part of you got lost, damaged, forgotten. And from that belief, a story begins to form. A story that whispers, you are not whole yet. A story that sends you on a lifelong quest to become what you already are. From a young age, the world teaches us that we need to earn love, prove our worth, strive for perfection. That happiness is out there, wholeness is out there, salvation is out there. And so we run. We run after achievements, relationships, validation, approval. We chase titles, image, reputation, and even spirituality, hoping that one day we will finally arrive at ourselves. But the irony is that the harder we search outside of ourselves, the further we drift from our center. Because the truth has never been out there. It's been within us all along. You were never broken. You were never missing. But the world convinced you otherwise, and so you started to believe it. You started identifying with your pain, with your story, with your scars. You began measuring your worth through comparison, through productivity, through how much you could offer others, while quietly abandoning yourself. And in that abandonment, the illusion of brokenness took hold. Wholeness is not something you strive toward. It's something you remember. It is not a destination. It is not the result of perfection. It is the recognition that beneath the roles, the labels, the pain, the fear, and the masks you've worn to survive, you have always been complete. It's just that you forgot. And you didn't forget by accident. You were taught to forget. You were taught to separate from your inner truth. Not to hurt you, but because those around you were also taught to forget. Generational amnesia, lineage of lost selves, passing down beliefs of unworthiness disguised as wisdom. But you can remember, you can return. The soul does not forget. Your true self has never wavered. It has only waited for you to come home, not by changing yourself, but by you accepting yourself, not by fighting your darkness, but by integrating it. Because wholeness includes everything you've disowned, the parts you hide, the parts you criticize, the parts you've labeled as not good enough. They too are part of your sacred designs. You don't have to reject your fear to find peace. You don't have to silence your sadness to feel joy. You don't have to be fearless to be free. All of it belongs. All of it has something to teach you. The cracks in your armor are not flaws, they are entry points for the light. And when you stop trying to be someone else, you make space for who you truly are to emerge. Wholeness is a radical act in a world addicted to fixing. The self-help industry, the personal growth space, even spiritual circles, can sometimes unintentionally reinforce the idea that you are not enough as you are, that you must constantly upgrade, optimize, and improve yourself. But you are not a machine. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a living, breathing, evolving being. And your evolution doesn't mean you were broken before. It means you are becoming more aware of your own divinity. When you live from wholeness, you stop measuring your life through results. You stop needing to prove your value. You begin to move with integrity, not urgency. You speak from alignment, not from fear of rejection. You set boundaries, not to punish others, but to protect your peace. You create not to impress, but to express. Your worth is no longer up for negotiating because you realize it was never something to be negotiated. It simply is. Many people are still chasing love because they haven't realized they are love. They are still chasing purpose because they haven't realized they are purpose. You don't need to find the missing piece. You are the piece. The moment you remember that, the search ends, and in its place, stillness arrives. Presence arrives. Peace arrives. Because peace doesn't come from control. It comes from surrendering to what's already true. To live in wholeness is to befriend the moment. to stop arguing with what is, to no longer seek permission to exist fully, to allow your joy to exist with your grief, your strength to coexist with your vulnerability, your clarity to coexist with your questions. You are not meant to erase your complexity. You are meant to embrace it. You are not the version of yourself that made that mistake. You are not the voice that tells you you're not ready. You are not the shame you carry from the past. You are the awareness beneath it all. The unchanging, unbreakable, infinite self that has never been diminished by anything you've experienced. That is your wholeness. That is what's been waiting beneath the noise of your mind, beneath the weight of your judgments, beneath the roles you've played to survive. We spend so much of our lives looking for freedom in the outside world. Freedom from stress, from rejection, from uncertainty, from the opinions of others. But the most important freedom is internal. It is the freedom from the war within, the war of self-judgment, of shame, of doubt, of pretending to be something other than what we are. That war has stolen enough time. It has drained enough energy. And today, you've seen it for what it truly is. Not a battle with your flaws, but a misunderstanding of your own worth. The inner critic may have once felt like truths, but now you recognize it as a collection of borrowed beliefs. The self-sabotage that kept you small wasn't weakness, but an outdated form of protection. The lack of forgiveness you've carried wasn't punishment. It was a wound waiting to be seen. And the belief that you were broken has dissolved in the light of your own awareness. You are not at wars. You never needed to be, because you were never the enemy. Your peace begins the moment you stop fighting yourself. Your healing begins when you welcome back every part of you with compassion. And your power begins when you stop seeking wholeness and start remembering that you already are. This was never about fixing you. It was always about freeing you.